Hello class, Sir Lawrence here. Our lesson for today is all about the Renaissance, a period of revival. Now, this is during the 14th and 17th century, after the medieval period. With further ado, let's start. Now, the Renaissance. Like I said, class, the Renaissance is during the 14th and 17th century. In this time, there's a sudden break from medieval values like valor, loyalty, chivalry, and honor. In this period as well, Europeans saw a revival of interest in economic and political affairs, and improving their technology, and taking interest in learning the ancient times, like learning about the ancient Greeks and Romans. That's why it's called rebirth. The Renaissance class started in 1300s in northern Italy. Now each city-state were rich merchant families. Aristocrats or elites, noblemen, and merchants played a very big role in improving transporting goods and accumulate or gather wealth. In this time or period, feudalism started to decline. Because of this, people afford freedom to explore the kind or fields of knowledge like arts, science, and philosophy. Next, we have humanism or Renaissance humanism. Now, it refers to a system of thought that treats humanity and individual as its focal point or center of interest. It gives prime importance to the individual or man, opposed to teaching of the medieval church which centered on faith and religion. It was influenced heavily by classical Greek, which focused on grammar, poetry, philosophy, and history. It believed that poets, writers, and artists can lead humanity to a better way of living. Now, what was expected of men and women during the Renaissance? Now, the ideal man during the Renaissance class was well educated, smart, can dance, write poetry, and play music. Now, they're called Renaissance men. How about the women? The ideal woman class should have the same qualities as men, but should not seek fame or political power. Renaissance women were better educated during this time, but had fewer rights than medieval women. Next, we have the notable thinkers during the Renaissance. First, we have Francesco Petrarch, 1304 to 1374. Francesco class was an Italian scholar and poet. He sought to unite the philosophical side of life. Purpose was to use persuasive language in expressing ideas that could be influential in social and political institutions. During his time, he believes that one could believe in God and one be humanist, that these two belief systems can work together to make the world a better place rather than to choose one than the other. Next, we have Desiderius Erasmus, 1466 to 1536. Now, Erasmus' class was a Dutch humanist, Catholic priest, and theologian. When you speak about theologian class, is someone who studies the nature of God, religion, or religious beliefs. Okay? Next was a teacher, social critic, and scholar. He published Latin and Greek translations of the Bible. His best work was called The Praise of Folly. Now, Praise of Folly class was a bold satire that pokes fun at the foolishness of mankind. Also, during his time, Erasmus wrote some essays that opposed the abuses and corruption of the Catholic Church. Now let's proceed with the Renaissance politics. Niccolo Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527. He was an Italian philosopher, writer, and skilled statesman. His famous book or work was called The Prince. His work challenged and influenced the course of political philosophy during his time. In his book, he thinks a good politician and a good person at the same time is impossible. Like a prince, the prince has the responsibility to protect the state from internal and external threats in a stable governance. He must know how to fight and know his reputation. Because of his ideas, class, his book was an endless source of controversies, as it defined the kind of relationship the state should maintain over its citizens. Next, we have the Renaissance artists. First artist, we have Da Vinci, or Leonardo da Vinci. He was known as the true Renaissance man. He was a painter, sculptor, engineer, architect, and draftsman. He was also an inventor and scientist whose sketches revealed observations about human anatomy and new engineering technology. Now let's proceed with his works. First is the Last Supper, as you can see right there. Okay, it shows Jesus' last meeting with his 12 apostles before the crucifixion. Next, we have the Mona Lisa, one of his masterpieces. Okay, so the Mona Lisa class is also known as La Gioconda, the wife of Francesco del Gioconda. Fun fact, some historians believe that Mona Lisa is a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci, as you can see right here. Proceed with the next artist. We have Michelangelo, or also known as Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. Okay, he was a painter, sculptor, architect, and poet like Da Vinci. Okay, so his sculptures and paintings showed realism, detail of human body, and expression to show personality and emotion. Proceed with his famous works. We have the Pietà and David. Now, Pietà class represents Mary sorrowfully contemplating the dead body of her son, which is Jesus Christ. This sculpture was commissioned by a French cardinal in Rome during his time. Next, we have David, the most recognized works of the Renaissance or during the Renaissance. Now, this is a symbol of strength and youthful beauty of a human being. Next, we have Raphael, another Renaissance artist known as Raffaello Sanzio de Urbino. Alright, so he was the youngest Renaissance artist during his time, and he was the master painter and architect. He improved perspective and realism by studying Leonardo and Michelangelo. He became the favorite painter of the Pope because of his great talents. Now let's proceed with his work, which is the School of Athens. This is one of the greatest paintings during the Renaissance class. Okay, as you can see right here, this painting featured one of the greatest philosophers in Athens. We have Plato and Aristotle, as you can see right here. And also, it featured Michelangelo, Pythagoras, and Raphael himself. Next up, we have the technology. We have Johannes Gutenberg, 1395 to 1468. He's one of the founders of the printing press in 1450s. He helped produce 150 million books across the countries like Netherlands, Germany, France, England, Poland, and Spain. The first book that was printed was the Latin Bible called the Gutenberg Bible. He revolutionized the knowledge and communication as it made knowledge more accessible and communication easier. This is an example of the printing press and its workers during the Renaissance era. Next, we have the medieval and the Renaissance comparison. Now, there are so many differences between the medieval art and the Renaissance art class. First, medieval art has no expressions. They're not realistic. Okay? And next, they have unrealistic poses. Now, meanwhile, Renaissance art has faces are filled with emotion and expression. And human poses are lifelike and very realistic. Next, the medieval art was the property of the church. Please take note of that. often religious themes. They use tempera paints, dry too quickly to correct mistakes. Now, how about the Renaissance art? So the Renaissance art class or artists take credit for their work and become famous. Like for example, we have Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Raphael. Okay? Next, they use oil paints. Let artists, okay, work slowly, create new colors, and obtain more lifelike effects in their work. Lastly, during the medieval times or medieval period, the church forbids displaying the naked human body. How about the Renaissance? Of course, it is the complete opposite. Okay, so like Greeks and Romans, artists study anatomy, okay, to portray humans realistically. Like for example, we have the statue David. Now these are examples of the medieval artwork and Renaissance artwork. As you can see, the medieval artwork class has no expressions at all, or realistic expressions and poses. Now how about the Renaissance? Completely opposite. It has realistic poses and expression. Okay? Now let's proceed with literature. First we have William Shakespeare. Now, he was an English actor, playwright, and poet whose written works range from drama to comedy. He was a scholar in academic sense, but Shakespeare shared a common view with humanists as he was interested in ancient history and focused on the individual rather than the divine or God. Now, his famous works, first we have Antony and Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, Romeo and Juliet, and others. Now we have Julius Caesar or the Tragedy of Julius Caesar. It is a history or tragedy play by Shakespeare, first performed in 1599. Next we have Romeo and Juliet. Now this is a tragedy written by, of course, William Shakespeare about two young lovers whose deaths ultimately reconcile their feuding families. Next we have Miguel de Cervantes, 1547 to 1616. He was a Spanish poet, playwright, and novelist. His famous work is called Don Quixote. Now, Don Quixote class is a novel about a middle-aged gentleman from La Mancha, Spain, who was inspired by the chivalrous romances and novels. He read that he loses his sanity and tries to imitate them in his adventures. Now, he wrote this in order to undermine the influence of those vain and books of chivalry.